Well, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, good evening, and thanks for being in attendance tonight to all the people in the audience as well as the candidates. It's always very important to get your opinions out and let people hear kind of the way you think about things and the way things are going in the state and maybe the way you think they should be going. So very happy to have you here. For those of you that may not know, my name is Cal Brink. I'm the Executive Director of the Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to those Minnesota House Candidates Forum to all of you, which comes to you live from the Conference Center at Southwest Minnesota State University. Special welcome to those of you listening on KMHL AM 1400 and watching on KSSU TV. A little bit about the event itself. In 1992, the Political Science Association, a student club here at SMSU, began to host candidate debates. The Marshall Chamber of Commerce has been a co-sponsor since 1998. Also, both groups would like to acknowledge the support of the SMSU Faculty Association, so thank you for that. Our partnership is committed to informing the voters of our region as they prepare to choose the next state representative on November 4th. Our thanks to KMHL, the SMSU Radio TV Club, and the National Broadcasting Society for making possible our broadcast coverage tonight. And now let's meet tonight's moderators. Sociology professor Vicki Brockman will moderate the first half of our program. She is president of the SMSU Faculty Association. And political science professor Douglas Simon will moderate the second half. He is vice president of the SMSU Faculty Association. So let's get tonight started, and I'd like to have Vicki Brockman come up and get us going.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the debate between the candidates for Minnesota State House District 16A and 22A. We will have a series of questions from the audience and our media panel, and we'll finish with closing statements of 2 minutes each. Now let's meet our panel for this evening. We have Brian Higgins, the publisher of the Minnesota Mascot. Brian? We have Anna Heckrell Smith, a reporter from the Marshall Independent. Anna? And we have Aaron Ziemer, the news director for Marshall Radio. If you have a question for the candidates, please take a card from one of the ushers from the Political Science Association. Could you please wave those cards again? Good. They will gather your questions and deliver them to the panelists who will select questions of general interest and relevance to the selection. And now let's meet the candidates for House District 16A in alphabetical order. They are Laura Dreesen. She's the candidate from the Democratic Farmer Labor Party who lives in Lori Dreesen, who lives in Canby. The Republican candidate, Chris Swidinski, who lives near Ghent. The candidates for District 22A are Republican Joe Schumacher from Laverne and Diana Slider from Florence. It's now time to begin the questions. Candidates, you'll have up to 90 seconds for each response. Though you can use less if you wish. We will rotate the order in which you will respond. Please be alert to our timekeeper, Cole Johnson. He's president of the Political Science Association in the first row. He will signal when you have 30 seconds and then 10 seconds left. Audiences, please refrain from audible expressions of approval or disapproval so we can devote as much time as possible to our candidates. Panelists, your first question, please.
What types of ideas can you bring to the table to help spur job growth?
Lori Dreesen, your response.
Can you hear us? Okay. Definitely, I think that our main goal will be for education. If you look in our local newspapers, any of them, especially the Independent, you're going to see numerous jobs that are available right now. And the problem is that we don't have those people educated to fill those positions, specifically nursing, truck driving, welders, teachers. So our main goal to get jobs into the area will be to concentrate on education, getting the individuals educated. Now, the problem is it is not cost effective right now. Our kids are having a hard time paying for their educations and going to college. So we're going to have to figure out a way to have incentives for individuals to go to higher education and fill those positions when they come available.
Okay, Chris Swedinsky, your response, please.
Sure. I think, the biggest issue we're having when it comes to job growth, we do have some competition. We've had some really bright shining lights right here in Marshall. We've had big expansions. Runnings and other employers have done a great job of expanding their market access across the country. We've got a lot of stores opening in eastern United States, and that's been a great job grower. And essentially what that's going to do is when you expand your market, you expand your capability to compete, that's going to grow jobs here locally. But also, our tax structure. Our tax structure, there's a lot of incentives that local cities and counties do go after job creators. Kind of beefing some of those things up as well, but also acting as a buffer. We've got the state of South Dakota is right across the border when it comes to, regulation, business regulation. We've seen a lot of issues where businesses have tried and dealt with maybe water permitting or different issues at their food manufacturers and chosen to go across the border. And, I do believe that, partnerships and trying to build partnerships between business and higher ed, is a foundational thing. Because really, if you can drive students to your door and those students will be in your door as a higher education entity, having that partnership with business, I carried a bill to really look at trying to find technology and equipment to get into our schools of higher education in partnership with the state so that the business and the state taxpayers have money in the game.
Thank you. From House District 22A race, Joe Schumacher, your response?
Well, obviously, being in Southwest Minnesota, jobs are a key issue, whether it's an issue for the state or for the feds or not. It's always an issue for us down here because we're always competing with states like South Dakota and Iowa for the jobs we have. And I think three areas that we could be looking at is continuing some of the progress that's been made over the last several years on environmental streamlining of the permitting process. This was something that Governor Dayton had put into executive order about nearly 4 years ago now. That was one of his first things that he did in office to try and move along the streamlining process so that businesses that wanted to grow weren't stifled by regulation. And so I think there are opportunities for us to continue on that path and really allow for businesses to expand in that way. Another problem I see in the state right now is the amount of underemployment that we have in Minnesota. We have almost 50% underemployment in the state, and so while people are working, they're not employed. And so we need to work with educational institutions as well as employers to find out where we can try and find a better balance for where things are at, because we just aren't creating the jobs today for what we're educating people at. And so we need to also continue with that and continue with the angel investment credit and other internship credits that have been pushed forward in previous legislatures and do more to invest in those.
Diana Slider, your response?
Okay, I think our issue here isn't so much of not enough jobs. Most of our counties here in southwest Minnesota, we've got unemployment rates of under 4%. That's considered full employment. If that isn't enough jobs, South Dakota's got all kinds of them. Some of them even pay a whole $10 an hour, which gets us neatly segued into what the real problem is low-pay jobs, dead-end jobs. That's what we need to work on. And of course, raising pay is one thing. That's one thing we got to do, but we got to raise skills too to justify that pay so we can make products that will sell for more in the world market. And to do that, we need to improve our education and our access. Right now, to be a janitor, you have to know how to handle hazmat. That requires at least a high school education. Almost any field now is requiring at least a couple of years of technical school and college. And it ain't like the old days when an 8th grade education would cut it. That free public education our Constitution requires for every child. Well, we need to start looking towards expanding that through at least 2 years of community college or technical college. And we need to follow that. Some method Germany's used, they're getting ahead quite well in the international marketplace, and they have some of the highest wages in the world. That's the path we need to follow.
Next question.
Anna Heckrell-Smith from the Marshall Independent. Deteriorating roads are a big problem in southwest Minnesota. Many of our counties can barely keep up with the cost of just preserving our current transportation system. Some have blamed the issue on less state funding, increased material costs, lower gas tax dollars because of more fuel-efficient cars, and an increase in heavier farm machinery using the roads. What would you do, be it bills, laws, or other means, to better fund road preservation and prevent our roads from degrading?
House District 16A, Chris Swidinski, your response?
Well, I think, the biggest issue, even if you talk to the folks that are advocating for a raise in gas tax, is that even if they did a wholesale one, which would be at 17%, it would fall woefully short of where we need to go. So if we're going to raise gas taxes, we're going to raise maybe a wholesale tax. It's not going to meet the needs of the continuing use. We've got a lot of roads in southwest Minnesota and Minnesota. And, I think the fundamental issue we have to look at is what other means of financing do we have? So if we already know off the bat that raising taxes is not going to potentially fill that void, then what other options do we have? Well, we have the general fund. Many people say, well, we need to make roads and bridges a priority. We have the bonding bill. In the past, for the past 20 or 30 years, the portion of road and bridge funding coming out of a bonding bill has been exceptionally small. And you talk to those folks and you ask the leadership, why historically has that been a small part of the bonding bill? And they said, well, that'll put more pressure on legislators so that they raise the gas tax. So we can talk about bonding, we can talk about those other things, but if foundationally, if we're not doing projects that have local significance with bonding dollars, we can't really allocate things to local projects. And also the general fund. So if the money isn't going to be there in whole when it comes to financing these projects through the gas tax, which would be essentially a user tax, then we need to be thinking what general fund dollars and what general fund obligations should we be doing out of that and making it a priority. Last session we raised taxes $2.2 billion, had a $1.8 billion surplus, and spent $15 million. That was, sorry.
Lori Dreesen, your response.
Well, our highways are the backbone of our economy, and we all know that they are in terrible shape. Just drive on Highway 19 from Redwood Falls to Marshall, and you're gonna be joggling around the whole way. We have to find some dedicated funding, and increasing gas tax would be one way to handle that. I know the GOP has been interested in some savings in MnDOT, but that will only take care of a minor portion of what we need. I actually had talked to an individual when I was door knocking who works for MnDOT, and he said that they have really cut into their budget and they have made all the savings they possibly could. So we're going to have to look at bonding bill, we're going to have to look at gas tax increases, we're going to have to look at a wide variety of ways to fund this. But that has to be one of the priority issues for this next year, because we definitely have issues, especially out in this part of the state, with our roads and our bridges. Highway 68, you can drive, but you can't pull over to the side of the road because there is no shoulder on that road. It's been neglected for years, and we have to address this immediately.
Diane Slider, your response.
Oh, we got some catching up to do. It used to be, thank you, Minnesota was known for the best highways in the country back when I was young. I mean, we were considered right up there with, for example, Germany and France for our system of highways. And now, it's incredible how we let things fall apart. For example, we gave the truckers a slight weight increase for hauling agricultural products. Most of the cases, they can't even use it because sure, they can go 97,000 pounds, but here's a bridge a mile down the road that's only rated for 80,000 or in some cases left. we're falling behind. We are not competitive. We have some of the lowest truck weights in the world of any industrialized country. You can't even fill up a container and ship it around the other side of the world full. We're just losing productivity like crazy. And we let things go like we are. I mean, we're going to end up with a system of beat up dirt and gravel roads that you have to crawl down at 5 miles an hour because the potholes are so bad. So we're going to have to face facts. I got the message there in 30 seconds. What we're going to have to do is index our gas tax and our funding mechanism to inflation, like a wholesale tax. The other thing we're going to have to do probably is go to a ton-mile tax on heavy trucks.
Joe Schumacher.
Well, it's been interesting to me for the last few years. This issue has really come to a tipping point, I think, in the state. Particularly this year, we're hearing more about it at the door. We're hearing more about it at forums, and not only in this area, but across the state. There's a whole lot more momentum for different forms of transportation funding than there has been from what I've seen in the past. And I think that's going to help move an issue forward in this next legislative session. You know, we've done the Viking Stadium, we've done Minsure, and now we have transportation funding to tackle and have the legislature move forward on issues related to that. I've taken the position throughout this campaign that I'm not going to write anything off the table. I don't want to go into the next legislative session if I'm sent back up there to have my hands tied behind my back on anything. So I'm going to keep my positions open on what we do, but we do need to have some wholesale reform in the area. And I think there are some give and takes that everyone's going to have to do in order to do it and get past and get over some of these old pretenses when it comes to transportation funding, and then we might be able to see some real change and appropriate funding if we could just get over some of those hurdles.
Next question.
With a major budget surplus this past legislative session, what strategies do you have to keep a strong budget in our state?
Joe Schumacher.
Well, I think job creation is our number one goal with this. If people are working and they're happy to be working, we're going to have a strong economy, and we're going to be able to continue having a strong budget for the state. As I talked about in a previous question about the underemployment that we have in the state, I think that's a serious issue that we really need to be addressing, because if people aren't working up to their full potential, they're going to be happy they have a job, but they're not going to be happy with the job they're at. And if there's no way to grow in their job, they're not going to be happy, and they're going to perform less and be able to do less. And because they're not working to their full potential, they're not paying in the amount of taxes that they have the potential to pay. And so if people are working at the level they should be working at and are getting paid at that level, then they're going to be paying taxes at the level they have. And that underemployment is part of a lot of the problem that we have with that. We need to continue to watch our spending in the state and make sure that we have priorities in place, that we can't just spend on every project we see just because we have the money for it. We need to continue to have fiscal responsibility, but we need to get people working and working in jobs that they can really work in and grow in, so that we can continue to keep our economy going.
Diane Slider.
Well, Joe, you got it half right there. We need jobs, and we already got plenty of jobs. We need better jobs. And if you look at it, it's amazing what a booming economy does for our state budget. You know, when we go through a recession, we're paying out money to people. You know, unemployment funds, public assistance, people lose health insurance, you know, go to the emergency room, ka-ching. When the economy is booming, people are paying tax dollars instead. And that's what we need to do. We need to have a booming high-wage economy. And once you get that going, it solves a ton of other problems. And we got to watch the spending side too, of course. And I'm surprised, Joe, being a Republican, you didn't talk about that. But you know, we've got some real challenges in that the two biggest chunks of our state spending go to education and health care. And especially health care, we've got baby boomers getting old. We've got to deal with those challenges. And we got to help, for example, keep people in their homes out of nursing homes. Used to be when grandma couldn't get up the steps, we put her in a nursing home. Ka-ching, $60,000, $70,000 a year. Now we build grandma a ramp She goes running all over town, and the ramp was probably built by volunteers with a couple $100 worth of lumber. That's the way we need to go.
Lori Dreesen, your response.
Well, I agree that jobs are the key, and I think one big advantage is the minimum wage increase. This is going to have a good effect not only on those people that got that minimum wage increase, but also in our communities, especially our smaller communities and our communities in this area, where the dollars go directly into the pockets of the business people in these communities. So that's one positive. I believe we need to continue to add to the rainy day fund. I think if we do have money, we do have a surplus. We know the trouble we were in 2008 through 2012 when we didn't have anything in that rainy day fund. So definitely we need to continue to contribute to that. I also think that it's important for us to look at, as Diana said, to look at where's our spending going, and definitely our costs for nursing home placement is atrocious. And one of the keys is going to be keeping our senior citizens in their home for as long as possible, and being able to find ways to curb that cost by having workers go into the home. The problem is there are not the workers there to fill those positions. So that's another challenge we're going to have to look at.
Chris Swedensky.
Thank you. I think some of the biggest issues that we have when it comes to the state, when it comes to property taxes, is a statewide business property tax. And we talk about a strong budget, we talk about a strong budget position when it comes to the state. You know, my biggest concern has been when you talk to individuals and families across this district, yes, the state has piles of cash because they raised taxes $2.2 billion, and the economy happens to be on an upswing. I mean, if you look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, this S&P, things are looking pretty good. But you look at the rural economy right now, with grain prices doing what they're doing, they're half of what they were, but the inputs are still staying high. So the rents are high, fuel's high, fertilizer's high, seed is high. And so what that means is we're talking about disposable income. Whether it be disposable income in business, disposable income in families, it's not there. When you've got gasoline prices that are through the roof, and we say we're really happy that we're below $3. Well, for every cent gasoline is up across the country. So when we talk about a gas tax, we talk about all these things. That's disposable income. For every cent gas goes up across the country, it's $1 billion of disposable income that's out of people's hands, out of people's families. They're not paying mortgages, they're not paying bills, they're not going to the movies, they're not going uptown. The economy is going to be a little different than it's been for the last few years because of the ag economy. And so, you know, driving the ag economy, keeping things strong, you know, understanding where investments need to be made in our rural areas and supports, that's going to be key to keeping a strong rural economy.
One more question.
Assuming you won the election, but the other party had the majority, how would you, as a member of the minority, work to ensure that the legislature is not crippled by gridlock?
Diana Slider.
Well, whether I was in the majority or minority, I figure my responsibility is to represent the people. And you'll notice out here we don't have a whole lot of landslide elections. That means, you know, I'd be there to represent Republicans too. Working in the minority, I think I would, first off, not try to be obstructionist like Republicans have been the last few years. I mean, you can watch on TV the legislature, and it seems like numerous times the legislature is dragged down for hours, and it seemed like even days at times was sort of attempted filibusters. It was fun at times we'd get on Facebook and stuff and Twitter and comment about how many different versions of the same amendment they offered just to kill time. And that isn't serving the people. The way to do it is you represent your district, whether you're in the majority or minority, and you do what's best for the state.
Joe Schumacher, your response.
Well, I agree with my opponent that it's about what's best for the state. And I've lived through this for the last 2 years in being in the minority party and in the legislature. And really, you can do a whole lot if you know what you're doing with it. If you watch your rhetoric, you don't have to be the flamethrower. There are basically two types of people in the minority. There are the bomb throwers and the people that kind of dig in on issues. And I've tried to take the position of digging in on issues because that is where I enjoy being more, and to try and be effective, that's what we have to do. You have to also set expectations. You aren't going to get most of what you want. Sometimes you're not even going to get your name or credit for what you want, but if you're willing to put that to the side just to get something done and done right, then you're going to be better for it, your district's going to be better for it, and you'll be able to get things done in the legislature with that.
Chris Swidinski, your response.
You know, I think the biggest thing is just having open lines of communication. So just today, I was talking with Gene Pulowski, who's the chair of the Higher Ed Committee. We're constantly visiting about issues that are involving, higher ed. We have Southwest State, we have Canby campus and Granite Falls campus of Minnesota West. And so those are really the basic things. So when we're looking at policy ideas, you're not only 95%, we talk about gridlock, we talk about this. Most of it is not necessarily partisan. A vast majority of the bills do have bipartisan support. Working along those lines, there are definitely areas of disagreement when it comes to taxation. When it came to raising taxes on the warehousing tax, when it was business-to-business tax, when it was on farm taxes that were raised, I fought like the Dickens against it. But when it came to other issues like the Amateur Sports Center here in Marshall, when it came to finding PED research for fighting the virus that's decimating our hog herds, we found common ground and got the job done. And when it comes to fighting for farmers, fighting for small business owners, I'm going to be there, and people know that. When it comes to fighting for our small communities, I won the Legislator of Distinction Award for my work on behalf of small cities and towns across the state, because of my ability to work across the line and get things done, not from a Republican or Democrat portfolio, but because of a rural versus metro. And sometimes those are the battles we need to fight.
Lori Dreesen, your response?
Well, I would look at it the same way I look at being on the school board in Canby. My philosophy is kids first and always first. What's good for the kids is what's good for our district and good for our town. And that's how I would look at this too. Our district's people first. What's good for our district, what's good for our communities is what I would fight for. I can get along with people. I always have been able to get along with people. I enjoy working with people. And you have to work together. You have to have the philosophy that you're not there to butt heads. You're not there to dig your heels in and not move on an issue. You have to go with the thought in mind that you're there to do a job. The people have hired you to do a job, and that is to do what's best for your district, to fight for your district, to work hard for the people in your district. So I just don't believe it's of benefit to anybody when people dig in and don't want to move on issues and filibuster. So, definitely I would not be behaving in that manner if I'm elected.
Okay, this is the 2014 House Candidates debate coming to you live from Southwest Minnesota State University over KMHL AM 1400 in Marshall and on KSSU TV. I now welcome Douglas Simon to serve as moderator for the second half of our program.
All right, thank you. We'll go with our panelists again. A question for our candidates.
Young people are consistently leaving the area for bigger cities, be it for better jobs, more entertainment options, or a lack of feeling a part of a community. What initiatives would you bring forward to try to keep our youth in Southwest Minnesota and possibly entice younger folks back home?
Okay, so for this one, I have Lori Dreesen.
Well, recently I just read something from MREA that stated that in rural Minnesota, our kids are not finding the educational opportunities that they need, especially our rural individuals. They want to go to school out in this area, but the classes are not available. The classes that they want to take are not available. So our priority, I believe, is to make sure that our universities and our Minnesota West campuses expand, They expand and they make available more opportunities for our rural kids. We have got to start looking at the number of students that we're turning away because we're cutting our class sizes. We've got to look at the number of professors that are leaving because they're getting cut or they're asked to cover so much area. This is going to be the priority for our rural communities, is to expand our university and technical system out here and offer a wide range of opportunities for the kids in this area. If we do that, they're going to stay here. They're going to get jobs here. They're going to settle down here. They're going to have kids, and they're going to enjoy our area like they used to in the years past.
All right, thank you. Chris Wazinski, your response?
Well, I think, the biggest issue we do have is sometimes regional centers aren't necessarily in our state. So you go to the northern part of this district, which is Lackaparle, Yellow Medicine County. Folks' regional center is maybe Wilmer, or maybe it's Watertown, South Dakota, or for some folks, maybe it's Brookings, South Dakota, or maybe hopefully it's Marshall. And so the foundation is, where are people used to going? And oftentimes, even if you find the degree locally, so there was a report written by a demographer from South Dakota that I read probably 3 or 4 years ago that essentially talked about that migration rift from western South Dakota to eastern South Dakota. And so people they'd leave, Rapid City, or they'd leave Deadwood, and they'd come out to Brookings, or they'd come out to Watertown, and they'd find their degree, and they wouldn't be able to use that transferable degree. And so economic development, finding obviously a broad economy. So the broader economy that you can build. So obviously agriculture, manufacturing, food manufacturing are a big part of what we do here in Marshall. And I think that's really what the question is based at, is on our small cities in town, how are we enticing entrepreneurs to develop businesses and keep businesses here? And so, foundationally, it's not only having a degree that's locally usable, but also finding a degree and having institutions that are regionally significant. My hat's off to President Connie Gores for really pushing the ag education program here at Southwest State. I think that's going to not only make a big difference here on campus, but also in our high schools. So.
Thank you. Joe Schumacher, your response.
Well, this is obviously something that's near and dear to me since I grew up in Southwest Minnesota. I went to school here and then went back home and started a business down there. And really, my generation and the people who are a little bit older and a little bit younger than me, we get labeled as Generation Y, as the millennials, as a whole host of different things, and none of them are really all that positive with our labeling. That's just a generational thing. The next generation is the one that's going to screw it up for everybody. But what we're finding with the people that graduated between high school between 2000 and 2020, I suppose is where they're projecting, is that there's a bit of a more entrepreneurial spirit within the people that were born in that generation. So we're trying to become the entrepreneurial generation and really push forward with that. But we need a state that's going to encourage that. If we can have our region and the state as a whole be the kind of place that encourages small business startups, small business growth. Right now, people can't start if they want to get into the ag economy, if they want to become farmers. Land is too expensive, equipment's too expensive. There are too many barriers to getting into the market in the first place. And it's with that, as it is with other businesses and other industries, just to get started is too much of a barrier. And I think if we can move as a state away from putting barriers up to starting jobs and starting businesses and move towards encouraging that there's great opportunity for young people to stick around and utilize that.
Diana Slider, your response?
Okay. I agree. We definitely need to improve our education and keep people here. We need better jobs, too. But a lot of what we're missing, it's the kind of stuff you see on Facebook, especially if you're in some groups of young people. People want to network. The other thing is they want diversity. And that's one thing. I mean, if you look around the country, I'm kind of a stats geek, and you look at the cities that are succeeding, they're the ones that a lot of immigrants are setting in. They've got active GLBT communities. That's where people are moving to. That's where people are staying. And this is one place, I mean, our Republican representatives here have set kind of a bad example, for example, voting against the marriage equality bill. Fortunately, that passed. we really need to welcome new people here and grow our town instead of trying to be closed and keep people out. And that's a lot of the solution to it. And we do that, we get people, we got active social life. I mean, we need downtowns like a Main Street that doesn't roll up at 5 in the afternoon, and we're gonna have young people staying here.
Okay, panelists, next question.
Last summer, if you remember, we had about 10 inches of rain. We had a lot of rain going on around here. And we had some flooding. I think Laverne and Cottonwood both suffered drastically. Kind of wondering if there's anything, a lot of this had to do with infrastructure failure. Is there anything you can do as legislator to better prepare our area for such disasters?
All right, Lori Dreesen, you have this question. Oh,
Well,
pardon me. Chris, you have this
Okay, I was
question.
wondering,
Pardon
yeah.
me.
Yes, well, I think, foundationally, when we're looking at our infrastructure, a lot of, our cities and towns, I know Minneota had a system that was extremely old, so it actually dumped, the sewer system dumped into the fresh water system if it got to a certain capacity. And so whenever you're dealing with, 100-year floods or 200-year floods, obviously those are hard things to build into. But critically, infrastructure across the country is way behind. On average, I think I read an article saying water main breaks every day is over 700 water main breaks across the country a day. And so you multiply that, you even go down to New York City, the main electric line that runs Broadway, the main Wall Street, has been in the ground for over 100 years. They still have wood pipes in some parts of Manhattan. And that's obviously we're a little newer than some of those things. But, from a critical foundation, our basic water infrastructure, sewer systems, the city of Hazel Run just had a huge sewer project that went through. I used to work for the USDA Department of Rural Development, and those were a lot of the big projects that we did. Would build water towers, kind of bring some of those sewer systems up to snuff. So, having a vibrant, there's a program through the bonding bill. It's PFE, which is essentially critical structures to build water mains, to replace sewer systems. Those are things that need to be advocated for at the state. I worked with the League of Minnesota Cities, worked with a lot of Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities to make sure that was a vibrant part of the bonding bill, is to make sure our critical infrastructure is up to par.
All right, now Lori Dreesen, your response.
Yes, I was in Wood Lake earlier this summer, and they also got hit extremely hard in that community and are really struggling. The problem is the only way that they can make improvements is to add that to the property tax. And the majority of the people in that community are already on fixed incomes, so that becomes very difficult for those individuals. In our community, we just went through a whole new structure improvement and in half the community, and now we're going to be doing the second half of the community, and it goes on to our property taxes. And the property taxes, again, are falling upon elderly individuals with fixed incomes. So definitely, I think that when we talk about infrastructure, that's something that should be addressed in the bonding bills. For our smaller communities that don't have the higher tax base. You get into the suburbs, you get into other areas in the cities, they have higher tax bases up there. They would not need those dollars from bonding bills like we need them out in this area. And that would be an issue that our rural legislators definitely need to promote.
Thank you. Diane Slider, your response?
Okay, as the speakers have noted, we got some problems with aging infrastructure. That's just the start. I mean, it reminds me they've got Highway 14 near me torn up, and I noticed they peeled off a few layers of pavement, and here was this concrete slab underneath. So I did a little research and found that concrete slab was laid in the 1930s. Now, can you imagine driving a 1930s car on our roads today? Well, we're driving on 1930s roads. But if that isn't enough challenge, if you notice, we're starting to see things like a 100-year flood every 5 or 10 years. And that's because we got this thing called global warming. And you can argue about what's causing it and stuff, but it's hard to refute that it's not happening. And we're going to be facing challenges maybe we haven't even thought of. Like, for example, Marshall Hill has a pretty good flood protection system. But if we keep getting more of these big storms that just sit there and dump on us for hours and hours, that may be obsolete. We may need to upgrade that. And we may have to make some tough decisions, like, for example, upstream, do we take out some ditches and maybe convert some of this farmland back into marsh? And it'll be tough, but that's maybe what we're going to have to do. And I want to be forward thinking instead of living in the past and start working on that.
All right, Joe Schumacher, your response.
Well, running a cleaning business in Laverne, we definitely got our fair share of the cleanup jobs that came with the flooding in Laverne. I think we ended up with over 300 calls in about 6 or 7 days for people who just couldn't keep up with the cleanup that was going on in their basement and trying to get the water out and trying to protect what they had there. And we were in houses that had been sitting there for over 100 years, and we were in houses that were built 3 years ago and had the state-of-the-art drainage systems in their yards, and it just couldn't keep up. There are just some things you can't avoid. However, with this one, I think there were some things we could have probably avoided with some proactive efforts. Of course, it takes an event like this in order to bring that to the forefront, to make it a priority, to put it on people's minds. I mean, the last flood like this was 100 years ago, and so it wasn't on people in the forefront in people's minds, but it is now, and I'm hoping that we are able to get some efforts put into the next budget to provide for more strategic flood prevention in the area and do what we can. I was really glad to see that in the last legislative session here that there was more done with emergency management to make sure that that 25% match was just automatically put in, that there was a reserve for that. Instead of bringing the legislature together for a special session to do that, there was a step taken in the last year, and that really worked out well for us this time, and I'm hoping that we can continue with those types of things in the future.
All right, thank you. Panelists, next question for the candidates.
There's always talk of a rural versus metro disparity, specifically funding for one or the other, or one area getting more pull. What will you do to diminish this disparity, and also how will you work with your metro legislative partners to make Minnesota better?
All right, Joe Schumacher, you have this first question.
Well, it is one of the bigger issues. I think when you ask the question at forums or what have you about how you will work with the other side of the aisle, I think one of the bigger questions is how will you work with the other geography in the Capitol. And it's tough. It's tough. You want to go up to the Capitol and you want to defend your district because that's the district that you live in, that's the district that you grew up in and that you believe in, and your people are the best people up there that you can represent, and nothing is good enough for them. You always want the best, and everybody else, there's 133 other people in the House that want that same thing for their district, and it gets to be very difficult to try and do that and to strike that balance. And there are times when you have to give a little bit in order to get a little bit, and I think it goes back to that idea of understanding that you're not always going to get the credit for what happens. You're not always going to get everything that you want or expect, and to know that the whole legislative process is a long-term issue. We do have funding disparities. We have it in a whole lot of our budgets, and we see it in the policy end as well, that there are disparities and differences from the way we do things out here in greater Minnesota versus the way they do it in the metro. And we just need to keep this long-term look and keep defending our districts, but know that everyone else is doing the same for the very same reason.
Thank you. Diana Slider, your response?
Well, Joe, you and some of the other Republican candidates out here, I noticed on your campaign literature and stuff, have been trying to play up some of this anti-metro resentment, which I'm sure plays real well with metro legislators. And I even hear talk like, as if we can take money that's spent on what they call the wasteful light rail line, which is already meeting 2030 projections for ridership, as though we can spend that on highways. And of course, I think you guys know better. You can't take federal money that's for transit and spend it on highways. It's a whole different allocation. We turn down that federal money, it goes to another state. Okay. Now the reality is, as they say, one of the first skills of a successful politician is the ability to count. The majority of the state legislators, about 60% of them, are from the metro area. So if you're going to feud with them, you're not going to pass nothing. And if you're going to try to be a member of one party, you know, for example, even if you got half the seats out here in rural Minnesota, you get a half of 40%, 20%, you're not going to pass nothing. You're going to be lucky to get a hearing. The truth is, we got to work with metro legislators. We got to build coalitions. And you don't do it by knocking them.
Thank you. Lori Dreesen, your response?
Well, Diane hit it right on the head. Yes, you have to get along with people. You have to work together. And that means when there's a bonding bill that comes up and there's things in there that you don't agree with, you still have to sit down and work it out with them. And you possibly have to vote for it. You can't constantly vote no for every single thing. You have to sit down across the table from people. You have to work with them and give and take. Give and take is the key to any type of legislative activity. You can't have it your way 100% of the time. So definitely you have to get along with people and work it out.
Thank you. Chris Wazinski, your response?
Well, I think it's when we look at, kind of a common goal. And I think when you look at a lot of the way the funding model is set up when it comes to K through 12 education, a lot of the dollars are put into special ed, a lot of dollars are tweaked into specific areas that may or may not benefit rural areas. And because of the way the population makeup are, certain parts of the state, they happen to get much wider and general pieces of the pie. You know, you look at we talk about this over and over, but when we say metro, when I say metro, I mean Minneapolis and St. Paul. I don't mean Bloomington, I don't mean Chaska, I don't mean Maple Grove, I don't mean many of those parts of the state. And the biggest issue we have is there are portions of the state that get Minneapolis and St. Paul that have routinely been able to fail with having 50% of some of their students leave their districts, the other part transfer out, and yet they still get almost twice as much as some of our rural schools. And that's frustrating because we're succeeding in a lot of places when it comes to getting our test scores up where they need to be. We're succeeding in a lot of places when it comes to parent involvement. But there's other parts of the state that are failing routinely, and yet we give those kids no options. We have kids that are stuck in a school year after year after year that have no options because they're financially strapped to that district. And yet we just dump more cash into it. And so they suck up more pieces of the pie trying to fix a problem, and rural schools are left holding the bag. And yet we are not rewarded for our successes. And that's what I think what's frustrating when it comes to rural versus metro. And yes, I do agree. We do work together when it comes to bonding and many other issues, but some of those things do get frustrating at times from a rural metro perspective.
Thank you, panelists and candidates. It's now time for closing statements, which will be given in reverse of the order we drew earlier. So we will start with Diana Slider. Your 2-minute closing statement, please.
Okay, I'm kind of reluctant candidate. Well, first off, I'm kind of shy, but I guess Minnesota's a good state for shy people from my hair, and my opponent's kind of shy too. I don't know, maybe they had me run to kind of try to bring him out or something. But, you know, I get off on policy. I'm kind of a geek, and I kind of like debating issues and the back and forth, which has been a lot of fun. And I'm kind of looking for 21st century solutions. It amazes me, you look at what gets debated in Congress, at the legislature and stuff, and it's still 20th century issues that we're stuck on. In fact, it seems like some of the Tea Party are trying to drag us back into the 19th century. And some of this stuff, it's like, what are we arguing about? We got 21st century solutions. Why aren't we using them? Give you an example. Cheap little smartphone. Cost me $70 a year and a half ago. They probably give them away free now. You turn the thing on, and you tilt the thing. It knows that. It knows where it's moving in space. Okay. We're putting people in nursing homes because we're worried they're falling down. And we want to have help for them there right away. So what do? Somebody writes an app for this, and people are already doing this, that detects if somebody's falling down. It detects this rapid movement, starts clocking, and you got programmed 1 minute. If the person doesn't shut it off, it calls 911 or their caregiver. Right there's ways we can save thousands of dollars. Same thing with transportation. Right now we're doing a crude method of having people pay for roads, based on gasoline use. We can now, the equipment's already in most vehicles to measure how many miles you went and on what roads and stuff. We can charge vehicles by the actual wear and tear they make on the road, how much they're using the transportation system, what their impact is. And the technology's out there. It's just somebody's got to write an app, and our legislature has to get into the 21st century and take advantage of it. Thank you.
Joe Schumacher, your 2-minute closing statement, please.
Well, I'd like to begin by thanking the Marshall Chamber and SMSU for putting this event on tonight. It's always good to meet with folks and to talk about some of the issues that are out there and really hear what is on people's minds of what they want to see done and what they're concerned with out there. And I think the questions that we had tonight are a real reflection of what I've been seeing throughout the district and throughout the state over the last few months in particular. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve over the last 4 years in the legislature. I've served on a variety of committees, particularly in the healthcare areas and once in a while in the ag area as well. It's an incredible honor, and I'm so proud to represent our area of the state. I grew up in Laverne. I came up here to go to school, and then I moved back home to run a business where I get to serve the people of my area by helping them keep a clean and tidy home. And it's just a great honor to be able to represent them at the Capitol and to do what I can to try and reflect their values and what they want to see done in the state legislature. And if I get sent back for 2 more years, I'm hoping to continue reflecting those values and doing what I can to keep Minnesota and Southwest Minnesota investing in its future. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Swazinski, your 2-minute closing statement, please.
Thank you, Doug. Just to want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and join us here tonight. There's probably a few more faces in the crowd because of the rain we had this morning, so a few less people out in the field driving our rural economies. But it's been a great honor and a privilege to serve in the legislature. I'm Chris Swazinski. I'm your state representative here in House District 16A. I live just outside of Ghent with my wife Jessica and 4 kids. I farm on land that's been on our family for over 130 years, right on Highway 68 between Taunton and Porter, Minnesota. I serve on the Capital Investments Committee, Higher Ed Committee, and the Commerce Committee. I also was appointed by Speaker of the House Paul Thiessen to serve on the Legislative Energy Commission. We talk about energy issues that are affecting a lot of our businesses across our state with the high energy costs that we have in Minnesota and how that affects our competitiveness. And also with the International Legislators Forum. And there we deal with a lot of issues. I sit on the board with members from Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, and also Manitoba. Because a lot of the issues we talk about rural versus metro, but also our water and energy and all those other issues that don't really look at state lines and trying to solve solutions just for the Central America, North Central America. So. Appreciate it, and it's been an honor and a privilege to serve the good people of this district. Farming and manufacturing and jobs in our schools are the rock-solid foundation we're going to build our economy on. It's an honor to serve and represent you at the Capitol, and I'd appreciate your vote this November. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori Dreesen, your 2-minute closing statement, please.
Well, I'd like to thank you also for hosting this event. It's a great opportunity for us to talk about the issues in our district and to talk about the future of Minnesota. My husband and I live in Canby, and I have worked for 35 years in the health and human services field, serving senior citizens and individuals with disabilities. I've also been a member of the Southwest Minnesota Workforce Council. I am past president of the Canby Chamber of Commerce. I am also served our community as an election judge since 2002. I am currently honored to be able to serve our community on the Canby School Board. What is important to me is that we have a representative who is going to represent our communities out here, who is going to fight for our communities, who is going to put our district first. Currently, our current representative, Chris, does not put our communities first. He votes partisan all the time. And it's important that when we get to St. Paul, when we are elected to this position, we represent everyone, not just one party, not just special interest groups. So I would really thank you very much for allowing us to communicate with you tonight and for our ability to talk to you about the issues. I would encourage you to go vote, either vote early or vote on November 4th, and I would ask for your support in this election. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes our debate for the Minnesota House of Representatives. Our thanks to candidates Lori Dreesen and Chris Wazinski from District 16A, and Joe Schumacher and Diana Slider for District 22A. And thank you to media panelists Byron Higgin of the Minnesota Mascot, and Anna Heckrell-Smith of the Marshall Independent, and Aaron Zemer from Marshall Radio. I'm Douglas Simon, and I've been your moderator for this part of our debate. This program has been sponsored by the SMSU Political Science Association and the Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce. The sponsors wish to thank KMHL Radio, the SMSU Radio TV Club, the National Broadcasting Society, and the SMSU Faculty Association for their help with this event. From the Conference Center at Southwest Minnesota State University, this has been the 2014 House Candidates Debate. Thank you for joining us, and be sure to vote on Tuesday, November 4th. Have a great evening.